Malia, how are you friends? Nice to meet you, nice to see you. If it's your first time here, my name's Wade Crow. Today we're going to have a look at my mix called Kamilaroi Man. And if you'd like to have a listen to the mix before we actually look at the video, why don't you head over onto my website, www.wadecrow.net. You can have a listen to the song and I'll show you where that is right now. So here's our website here. And this is Wade Crow, musician, producer, engineer, and Kamilaroi Man. The Kamilaroi people are an Australian Indigenous mob, or First Nation mob, and we have been on this land for my ancestors for 40 to 50,000 years in that particular region. And this is part of my ancestry, as is other parts as well. And I'd like to celebrate this, and I invite you to celebrate it with me. And I wrote this song in this EP called Blue Skies for Earthly Highs. You can have a listen to the actual Kamilaroi Man track right here, or you can buy the EP by now. It just takes you through PayPal and you can download it straight away. $5.99, that's in Australian dollars, I believe. And yep, there it is, Australian dollars. And great buy, help support artists, support the music. You can also listen to me on Spotify as well. You can find my music there and a whole lot of other distributors as well. Okay, so that's the website. Check it out, have a listen to that song, because we're actually going to go and have a look at the mix and some highlights of that mix right now. Okay, thanks. Let's get over to it and I'll see you soon. Now, just one little thing too, guys, before we start. Because I was running Pro Tools and some software recording gear and all these sorts of things, it caused Pro Tools to play up a little bit. So there is a bit of editing extra that I had to do in Pro Tools. But in the meantime, please like, please subscribe, come on over to the YouTube channel. I will be adding more content as we go along. And stay in touch. You can also meet me on Instagram at Wade Crow Audio. YouTube channel, also Wade Crow Audio. That's where you'll find me. So why don't we get into it? Have a look now. Thanks, guys. Okay, so here we are in the mix. Basically, this is the final mix. This was kind of my final cut before mastering. Okay, I have a slightly separate master setup, but we're going to be looking at the mix here because this is where it all started. Okay, now what you see is basically the finalized recorded tracks that I've set up after I've done a lot of the recording. So if you have a look here, these are all my tracks here. There's quite a few of them. I usually end up using up to 120 tracks pretty easily if I need it. So basically my setup involves all my drums, okay, which I do with color coding with all my instruments. I always keep it the same so it's easy to remember and easy to find. So I always do my drums as a dark burgundy, I do my bass as pink, I do Vox as usually yellow or orange, and I do a slightly darker tint for the final, so like the main track, the mastering track for that. I use different shades of green for guitars. Blue is normally either rhythm guitars or VSTs if I'm using VSTs. So I also have an organ track here. Okay, I've done in brown, and then my mastering sort of final audio track. On the other side of this, okay, what I have set up here, and I usually do this a little bit further in the mix, but I set it all up straight away at the beginning. This is what you call parallel compression. Okay, so you'll have one track that is basically a clean channel coming from the mix, and the other one you have compression on it. Okay, and you start to balance them off a bit. You can actually have them set up where you compress the sides, hard left and hard right, and you can keep the normal track in the middle. I've played around with these and they do give slightly different results. And so for Kamilaroi Man, I've actually panned both channels hard left and right. Okay, so this is the drum channel, bass, first guitars, okay, the 12-string guitar. Then I have the rhythm, the electric rhythm as well, the keys, the vocals, and the vocal backing tracks. Okay, so let's go to the main one here first. I'm going to bring in all my drum tracks, and for this I actually used a VST. Okay, so here we have my original drum tracks, and I have them multi-channeled from the VST. Okay, the VST I'm currently using is Blackbird, and we got that from, okay, it's playing up a little bit here, probably because we've got so many things running. But this is the Blackbird kit from 8Dio. It's a really, really awesome kit. Okay, sounds great. And basically what I do is have it multi-channeled out. So I've got the kick, the snare, the top of the snare, the bottom of the snare, hats, rack, floor, cymbals, and the overheads. Then I had them running into my drum sub. Okay, my drum sub, and I always record the track on that. Okay, now if I flip over, it comes out as MIDI. There's all your sort of VST or MIDI information. And what you can do if you want to, it does take up a lot of power, but you can actually record the audio of each track and each drum sound onto its individual tracks, and then you can print them down onto your main print track. Now, I don't always do that because it does take up a whole lot of power from my computer, so I normally just let them play. I have a listen, and it's not using anywhere near the same amount of power. Okay, so once I have everything sounding really good, I'm happy with the way it sounds, I want to put on some verb, so forth, I basically print down a dry track first before putting too many effects on it. I will EQ the track, and I'll make sure that this print track is really nice. So I now have an audio track with a good drum kit on that. Okay, sounds great, sounds powerful, and then I can sort of play around with that and start adding that to the mix. I have my guide track, so it guides me for the timing and the rhythm of everything else. But I also have a click track when I need it as well, because they're all falling into time. And I basically spend a lot of time on the drums because it basically underpins every other part of the song. And if you don't have your drums or your timing right, your rhythms right, everything else is just not going to work properly. Okay, so I get the drums down, but before I even record anything, I generally have a good guide for the song. I know where my rhythms, I know where my introduction is going to be, I know how long it's going to be, I know how long the verses are, and I have all that sort of planned out, and I work that to my drum track to the song, okay, that I'm playing with my acoustic. Alright, so I've written my song, I'm playing it out, and then I get the drums down, so I've got a bit of a rhythm track, I can start to hear how it sounds, and it helps me to develop the song. Now, it does take quite a bit of time to do this sometimes, but if you want a good result, you got to hear the song. Okay, you got to have it in your head, and you got to spend time getting everything right. Okay, so you can see that I've basically I've kept it pretty simple. Okay, I've only sort of added a little bit of gain. Okay, Blue Cat gain. This is a free plugin. Okay, you can get these from Blue Cat. And I just use Protools EQ, just really basic EQ, okay? Because I mean, there are better ones out there, but I find the Protools EQ is really, really good. It does what you need it to do. So I basically have those running on all my tracks, and that's it. It's just the good raw drum sound. I take, when I look at this one here, I basically take off any reverb, and I can also use some of these settings to get the actual drum kit sounding a bit fatter or a bit tighter, or however I want that to sound. Okay, so I'm going to turn that off anyway. So that's the interface, and I feed it through each one. So I use contact, interface, go to the plugins, contact drums, and you just link each one to each drum. Okay. There are videos out there, I won't go into how to do that, but there are videos out there on how to do that, and multi-track your drums. The other thing too is you want to make sure that your drums, like for your kick, they're going straight up the center. Okay, for your snares, they're usually to the left-hand side because people are playing their snare over here. And you basically get that spatial atmosphere for your drums. So hi-hats, these were panned hard left and right, basically because the hi-hats in this are essentially sort of out here. So I said, well, let's put them right on the side. They probably should be more like this, but it's okay, it doesn't matter. The rack, I've put, that should also sort of be a bit more left and right, tighter there, but again, it's not 100% important. I wanted some of these toms and the the toms and things sounding a bit more to my right, and then I could put the floor drum more to my left, and the cymbals as well. Okay, so it's up to you how you want to space it all out. The overheads, they're just overhead mics, and they're obviously stereo pair, so you want to keep them sort of wide and get that good sort of sound coming through. This is my drum print track. There's no effects on it. There's no EQ because everything should be done pretty well in here. And then I use Slate, okay, if it shows it. I use Slate effects to give it some compression, give it some a little bit of EQ tightening, and just a little bit of extra color that might come in. And I put a final compression track on it here, effects on it here as well. But a lot of the effects that I use here, it'll either be for boosting it a bit, bringing it up into the mix, or just very, very mild effects there. Okay. Okay, so here's the effects. Basically, I put on a channel, kind of like a channel simulator. Simulate the like the pre-gain stage that's going to go through. You can put your noise reduction things on that. They don't have big effects on it, but it's all about subtlety. You've got to keep everything subtle. You don't want to go in too hard, really mixing up effects and slamming hard compression on it. If you have a look here, you notice the output is actually quite low. I give it very mild, like 0.61 dB of a little bit of punch and a little bit of high lift. That's 1 dB. My EQ, kind of reducing some of that. It doesn't need a lot. It's just about getting out some of the ringing and things that I might not like and just tidying up that sound. Okay. Also have the volume trimmer at the end, which I don't even use, but it's there if I need it. Okay. I then have my compressor. This is a Slate compressor. Okay. I really like this one. I'm normally, let's see if we can play the song here. You'll see how much it actually has on. Well, okay, so it affected the CPU power there, but you can see it's very low. Probably usually about 3 dB as a standard. Minus 3 dB as a standard I use, and then you can just add your gain stage at here. Okay, so that's there at 1.8. So the reduction is probably about 1.8 to 2 dB. But again, it's kind of up to you how you want to do these sorts of things. Okay. And now it's not going to do this for me. The next one, what I did with the drums, if we have a look at a drum print, you can have two drum sort of basses sort of running here. I used a VST because I kind of found regularly that with a normal bass, it was always just a little bit out of time, and as much as you edit things, and it caused all sorts of problems. And I just found that getting some bass software just made things a lot more quicker for me to mix with, and I can really get the sounds that I want. So this gave me a really nice kind of bass sound that would mix well into tracks. So this is just your interface. It's quite an older one, but it is really good. It's Spectrasonics. They do updates a lot, and you can get all sorts of bass sounds with that going on. Okay, so all I really did as well, I just wanted to make sure that I would. So here's the Trillion. Here's the bass dry, in case I need that second one there. Okay. Yep, and so I ran it through to this, so I had the main sound here, and I also did a what would you call it, an effects track, I guess, and just did a little bit of tweaking to the bass sound, and they would both run into this bass print here, or the sub, and then come back to the print. So I could actually move those around, but that's all right. Depends what order you want to have this. I do change the mix around a little bit to suit how I'm working, but it's up to you. Okay, so essentially I had these sounds going to here, and then they would both run to this, okay, and then print out to my bass print track. Now I had the bass running up the center, because that's usually where your bass runs, along with your kick drum. Okay, On the bass effects, again, not a lot, just a little bit of EQ, amp simulator, give it a bit of a little extra kind of simulated warmth. I did have to pull it back a little bit, just a little bit of a trim. Again, half a dB for extra punch, and about a dB for just lifting that sort of higher end up as well. The EQ is very minor. Okay, I just wanted to give it a little bit of twanginess because it was very hummy at first, so I got rid of that. Okay, so these I'll just put away. Now, when we started coming in, I'm going to jump over to the guitars here, because with what I did with the 12-string guitars, I'll bring these up first. I did quite a few guitar tracks. Okay, again, very simple EQ. That's all I put on them. Okay, and then ran them through to a print, gave it a bit more EQ, and again, just the tweaking with the virtual model. Okay. And that was the 12-string. Now, when I recorded the 12-string, this is the 12-string that I was using. And when I did my miking, I did an A/B stereo mic, one here, one here. So I had two mics, and they were facing towards this end. Okay. If you tend to put a microphone around this area, it's going to get a lot of hum and a lot of deeper resonance from the guitar. And you want to kind of avoid that. You want to keep it brighter, so you put it here, and you can actually get a lot more of the acoustic sound, and you'll still get the resonance coming from the depth of the guitar as well. Okay? So, once again, just some basic EQ. Okay, I'll show you the EQ here. Turn it on. Basically, I'm rolling off quite a bit of the low end. Okay, it's still keeping that kind of nice chug and thump there, but it's just rolling away a lot of that noise that the drums and bass are going to be filling. There's also around the 500-600K, okay, and around about the 3.3K. It's getting rid of some of that high-end twanginess, and also did a roll-off. The 600, between 400 and 600, you're going to get a bit of boxy noise, so you want to get rid of that as well. Okay, I also did a rollback around 4K hertz. That's cutting it down quite a bit, but basically because the 12 string is really bright and sharp, so I didn't want too much of that there. I just wanted the finer qualities of the 12 string just running in the background. Okay, so that's how I had that. All right, for the lead guitar, the electric guitar. For the electric guitar, in the rhythms, I was basically just using my Les Paul. Okay, this is a gold top. It's a Les Paul Custom R7. Okay, so really good quality guitar, very nice, and I tell you, it really didn't need much at all. Really didn't need a lot of EQing at all. It just sounds really good. Now, with the volumes, I basically had the volume set to probably about 8. Okay, where I needed it, and the tone was about 5, so it's about a midway tone, and maybe I pulled back a little bit to get a little bit more of that crunchiness that I wanted out of it, but it was also going through the amp, the EVH 5150 amp, and it was stereo mic'd. Alright, so I was using a Sennheiser MD421 to get a little bit of that deeper end, so it got that nice richness of the Les Paul rather than just that sort of shreddy sound. It still had a lot of that depth to it, and I used an SM57 on the other speaker. So I was basically recording it as twin in stereo and just pan them hard left and hard right. Okay. So my goal here when I recorded this song was not so much to do a song that was country, but more blues. I wanted to have really nice quality of all the guitars that were there shining through. There's about 3 different guitars that I used. It was a 12-string Gibson, and at 1 or 2 points I think the Telecaster was there as well. This little software here is a reverb. Yep, classic reverb. That's by Salte as well. So I basically got the Slate package and I use that a lot. Alright. So let's make those inactive. Now for the lead guitar, I used this effect here. and it's a little bit kind of, I'm still getting used to using it a little bit, but it basically gives you a slight doubling effect. There's they're kind of offset by maybe a couple of milliseconds, and it makes the guitar sound a lot wider, a lot bigger, almost like there's two of them. It's got a little bit of that harmonic kind of sound that comes with it, and it gives it a really interesting kind of quality. It just fills the space up a little bit more. I panned hard left and right. Okay, and I also used a delay, okay, but I didn't actually use any reverb on here. I did use reverb, but with my settings, I've used a kind of a spacey guitar effect. I did the tapping for the tempo rather than sort of run it in sync, and the left was a 1/4 quarter beat spacing, while the right was an 1/8. Okay, so the 1/8 was playing a bit quicker than the left, and it just gives that nice sort of spatial feel. But I didn't bring it in too much, so I pulled it back, as you can see, probably about just around 5 dB for the effects, and I just want to bleed that effect in a little bit. With the reverb, I was using my outboard lexicon, okay, and again keeping that very low. I didn't want to bleed that in too much. I just had that there to sort of help. And I did put it on the sub mix and blended that into the final sound rather than having it as a separate effect and blending into that. I tried both out, and I just found that this was working a little bit better and just keep things a bit more subtle. Okay, so like I said, with this mix, I really didn't want to push anything particular too hard. Okay, the organ, very similar. I used, let's have a look. So I used a contact instrument. Again, VST, so half the song's VST, but if you can get them sounding good if you work on them right, and people wouldn't even know. It's very hard. They're so good these days, it's very hard to tell the difference between some of the real instruments and the VSTs. Pianos you can tell quite a bit more, but with some of these others you really can't sort of see a lot of difference. Okay, so what was I using? Here we go. Look at this. I was just using a very standard, I think this came with contact. It's just like the 70s vibrato organ. I had one a little bit softer than the other. So this one here, actually, this one here is contact, sort of basic one, and this one here is the 8DO. This is an 8DO and 8DO effect, and I actually blended the two together to get that really nice sort of churchy organ kind of sound in the background. So I'm running two VSTs through one instance. They've got a basic rogue one, which is kind of like a deep purple kind of sound organ, and this preset worship one here, and like I said, blended the two together. I kept the rock one a bit lower because I didn't want that to dominate, and I had the 8DO one sort of a little bit more dominant because it had a bit of a nicer melody to it. Okay. And again on my sub, I had the red 17. There's a red 17 and a red 57, I think. Okay, so we can see here I got my compressor on as well again. Threshold's about minus 18 dB. A pretty fast attack. I've got an auto release and the ratio's at 4:1. Full mix, and my gain's about 3.6 dB a gain. Okay, because it's squashing a little bit harder, I just gave it that 3.6 to bring it up to close to balance. I didn't use a high pass filter on this, no real need to, because it was playing in the mid range where it needed to be. My red 17, okay, this is like a small old 1950s kind of, 1960s kind of mixing desk simulator, and I just used it to give a little bit of that extra tone. These are the Abbey Road Studio plugins by Waves, and get these Abbey Road ones, they're really good. A lot of the Abbey Road stuff they did is really, really good. You can do bass lift. Bass lift works really well, sometimes a bit too well, but it gives it a really nice, smooth, warm kind of feeling. It's really seems to be simulated to give a good analog sound, okay, and it worked quite well. Also used a bit of a delay, but kept that kind of low. Okay, here's my repeater again, very short kind of delay, a stereo modulating delay, and just linked it into the host like the other one as well. Okay, so that's essentially all the instruments. With the vocals were a little bit harder because I was recording in a room that really doesn't have any isolation properly, and it also doesn't have much sound diffusion capability technology in here. I really had to work with the vocals a lot. So if you're going to do something, maybe get to a studio and do your vocals. It'll probably work a lot better. You won't have to mess around so much. Or if you have a good vocal booth, you really need something that's going to be properly insulated, probably best to have it a very good flat sound, so you don't want to be getting too many things to have to cancel out. So as you can see here, I really had to do a lot of EQing, and I just used one band EQs just to get rid of small areas that I found were not too good. Okay, then I added a bit of reverb, okay, and blended the reverb in, but I kept it very minimal. I didn't want it to sound like it was a big hall, big room or anything. I just a little bit of space. Okay, and this one is a De-Esser, which I had to use as well. Okay, I had it set pretty hard and the frequency around 4.2 hertz because that's where a lot of their sibilants and their S's and things were causing some problems. When it came to mixing, again, I still had to use quite a bit of EQ to try and get rid of that. The vocals were different. I didn't really have to EQ. These are the backing vocals, these tracks here, and I really didn't have to do a lot to them. I just used my usual Slate VMR setup, just a bit of EQ, some good warmth, and volume control, which I hardly even used. Okay, so I didn't use a lot of that. A little bit of reverb, if it ever comes up. A little bit of reverb. You can see I kept it quite low, about 50%, and just pulled it back a little bit and controlled the rest on my strip here. I used a bit of compression. Okay, this is a compression rack. You've got 3 compressors. You don't have to use them all at once. You can just use 1, 2, or whichever combination you like. There we are. So you have all 3 different compressors. This is your mu, this is your red, and this is your grey. Okay, they're based on very popular compressors, and they each give a bit of colour. But as you can see, I'm really not using a lot. 1.8, and the makeup is 0.9. The threshold is -20, so that's where about the range that I keep my vocals anyway. Okay, and this one I don't think I actually used at all. I'm not sure. Okay, so that's basically all the mix setup, right? What I will do is I'll bring these the original 12-string files out, and I'm just going to flip around. Okay, so we're just looking at, these are all the, pretty much the final ones, except for the vocals. You can see that I had to do some work on those. Just spread this out a little bit so we can see it a bit better. So what I basically did to get these prints, okay, you can see that it's nice and squashed down and nice and kind of, you see where the extra energy is coming through here, sort of the lower pitches with the bass, same with the drums. But what I basically did was that I had my audio track, which was this one here, the drum print. I clicked record and I played I let the track play. But what I also did was some certain looping. Now if you don't have outboard gear, that's okay. You can still just run it this way, and you can put a compressor. You can use like a plug-in and get, where are we? Dynamics, and you can just use one of these here. Okay, this is the mu as a compressor, and you can put that on your track, put that on your track in one of your slots, and when you record, it should compress it. Give it a couple of test runs first, and you should be able to get a nice compression out of that recording. Okay, once it's recorded down, you can then turn it off because it should have recorded it with that compression on. What I did, I used an outboard EQ and compressor. Okay, so the signal went from Pro Tools through my audio interface, my EQ, through my compressor, and back to Pro Tools again. Okay, and you can do that just by adding sends here when you have it all looped up the right way. Okay, and so because I was using some outboard gear, it just kind of works a bit better than plugins, of course, and it gives you this nice kind of finish here. Everything's level and everything's good. I tried the same thing with vocals, running the vocals through it. Still had to do a little bit of extra work and a bit of cutting and pasting, but it came out very similar. Okay, still came out quite good. You can see that with a lot of these. Here's my original guitar track. So what I would do, I was recording each track, okay, and once I had them all tidied up, I did all the editing here first, and then I had created a stereo track, because I think these were mono. I then created a stereo track and recorded both tracks together onto a stereo track here. All right, and again, it was all running through my outboard gear and back to this. So I was able to get the tracks sounding nice. When you see here, you can see they're actually quite different in volume, things like that. So the EQ was able to, the compressor was able to sort of fix everything up and make it a bit more level. I had to play with a lot of the, you can see this is like, I had to add 11 dB because the recording was so quiet. It was acoustic guitar, and I had to add a little bit extra here as well on this side. So the channels here seemed a little bit out of balance, but when you run them through the compressors and clean them all up, they come out nicely balanced. Okay, and that's just kind of what I wanted to show you there. And at the very end, you could see that I had the dual compression, the parallel compression channels all set up. So when the mix runs through, all the channels, all the sub channels go to the parallel pair and then run to the final sort of master channel. Okay, and by doing that, you're able to get everything sounding really, really nice. Everything should be in balance, and you can get it back sounding really, really good. Okay, so that's most of the mix. I'm going to come over this side now and just quickly discuss this. What you do with parallel compression is that you have two channels for each instrument. Okay, and essentially what happens, if I use my drum track, so this is my main final drum track. When I play my drums, the signal's coming out of here. Now it can go straight to the master, but what you can do is you set up the parallel channels, okay, for parallel compression. You have both of your outs going to your main and your inputs coming from that single channel, okay, 15-16. So for me, 15-16, 15-16, they're both taking the same signal from the one source. That final stereo source is coming into these two. They're both stereo. Okay, you put a compressor on one, okay, and then you can start to compress it. Probably 3-to-1 is all you really need. You don't want to over compress things because it really starts to affect the sound of the mix. You want your mix sounding as natural as possible, as if you're standing in a good studio and listening to the song, or you try to get to that CD quality. You know what I mean? That's how good you want to try and get it, because once it goes on to mastering, they're going to add more compression as well. Most likely, it goes through limiters for radio, all sorts of things. So you don't want to overdo your mix, okay? And it's best if you have the mix coming in probably no more than 14 or 12, minus 14 or minus 12 dB, okay? Now the reason I say that, so most of your recording levels are going to come in about minus 20 to minus 25, in this range here, and that's okay, all right? You can turn them up and down, but you want that final kind of level. Always keep this at 0, and you want that final level, okay, coming in about minus 14. Reason being is most radio stations, most online players, YouTube, all that sort of thing, they have their own limiters in there anyway. So most radio players actually set to about minus 23 dB. So if you're cranking yours up at minus 6 or positive 6 even, that's just way too much. you don't need it that loud, because the thing is, if you have it further down in what they call the noise floor, or that deeper range, you can increase the volume and everything still stays the same. Okay, you don't get distortions, you don't get clipping, you don't want any of that. So if you're always going to keep your audio while you're recording on that side of the mix, you want to keep that around minus 24 to minus 20 dB, even come up to maybe minus 16 dB, that's okay. Just remember, it's going to be a little bit harder to sort of control those, but you want to control this level meter, because this is level. This is not about loudness, or volume. This is about level. Okay, the level of the mix. And where your noise floor is, most noise floors are way down here, so don't have to worry about that. But you just want to control your level. Okay. You can pan these as you like. I usually just do stereo for most of them except bass, because you want the bass sort of going up the center. And as I said, you can actually change these. You can have one side as full left and right, and the other channel can be centered. You can do that for each one of them. You can play around and have a listen to see how it sounds, okay? But this is the way I've set mine up. I use slightly different compressors for different channels as well, different instruments, okay? So my vocals got the moo, Vox got the moo, the keyboard's got the grey, the lead guitar got the red, because the red's pretty much my favourite compressor. Guitar's got red. The acoustic guitar's got moo as well, because it's a little bit more subtle, the moo. Okay, but it works really nicely. Finally, in my master channel here, I have a stereo imager. Okay, and you can actually increase and expand the stereo kind of sound in the mix. Okay, you can just give it a bit of a push like that, make it wider, or make it tighter. I usually like to have it just on the outside. Okay, I had a 1-band EQ just to roll off the top there, and that was I've only brought it down to 13k. Okay, and finally I just had a very mild EQ running and just kept everything simple. By the time it was getting to here, I wanted it just about perfect anyway. When I took to mastering, I changed a few levels, used a bit of EQ. There was a high pitch resonance coming through I didn't like, so I had to really try to find that and really cut it out. Okay, and that was in mastering, so that was something different. This is my output channel right there. Okay, so that's the mix. That's how I mixed Kamilaroi Man. As you can see, quite a lot of work there. It took me a long time to do all of these, and I worked on this song and other songs sort of intermittently. You don't want to listen to one all the time, because your ears get too used to it. If you have any further questions, I can do more videos on talking about my mixes and things like that. Just so you know, I did everything in the box, okay, except for a little bit of outboard gear. I recorded in this room at home without, what do you call it, there's no isolation. It's not a fully isolated room, okay. The neighbours do hear it a little bit, but I try not to do too loud. And I don't have any of the acoustic foams or anything in here as well, so I had to try and really work around some of those problems. The reason I don't have my acoustic foams and things is because this is a rental, so I don't want to put things like that on the wall and have them permanently fixed to the wall, because it can damage the walls. Okay, and I want to take that stuff with me. So that's it for the mix. I hope this has been really helpful. I hope you've got some ideas out of how to lay down a mix. If you have any questions, throw them in the question thing. Please share this video around. This is Wade Crow. Please like, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Maybe we'll do a look at another mix, maybe ayahuasca song or something like that next, because that uses a lot more VSTs and guitar as well. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and yalo namare. See you next time, until we meet again. Cheers.